Hello, Year 10, and welcome back to your second lesson this week and the final lesson on the Cold War itself. We've looked at how communism collapsed in Eastern Europe, and today we're going to look at how did the USSR collapse? How is it that Russia ended up turning from communist to capitalist? Just a quick recap of the rules before we begin. Can you make sure you've got quiz 2 from Google Classrooms so you complete it as you go along when prompted? Again, please make sure you read that question properly. I would hate for you to drop marks when you did know the answer but you misread the question. And I would really recommend making notes or flashcards as we go through this PowerPoint presentation to help you with your revision. Pages 37 to 38 in the revision guide will help you with this, and they're in Google Classrooms already for you as well. This quiz needs to be submitted to your teacher by Sunday, the 10th of May at 5 p.m. Please make sure you submit the quiz. Don't just do it and forget about it. You should get your score back straight away. So, a quick recap on what we've learnt about Gorbachev in his relatively short time in charge of the Soviet Union. He'd brought capitalism into the USSR with perestroika to improve the economy. He'd exposed the government corruption with policies like glasnost so that the Soviet Union was far more open. He'd ended the arms race with the USA, and he'd even let them keep strategic defense initiative in the process, that building a shield using satellites in space to protect the USA against any nuclear attacks. He'd pulled the Soviet troops out of Afghanistan after 10 years, admitting defeat to the Afghans. He'd completely rejected the Brezhnev Doctrine, and by doing so he had allowed the Warsaw Pact to break up by not stopping countries from leaving. Now that's quite a lot done in a very, very short space of time, from 1985 to 1989. Now, as you can imagine, to the West, there was something called Gorby Mania at the time. Gorbachev was seen as a hero, a Soviet Union leader who at last had common sense. And he got the Nobel Peace Prize, Time Magazine's Man of the Year. The West loved Gorbachev, and you can understand why. He'd done a lot for the West, certainly compared to other Soviet leaders. And that was part of the problem, because if we look at this from a hardline communist's point of view, we could see here that Gorbachev could be seen as a disaster. That he had brought capitalism into a communist society. He'd allowed the government to be interrogated by the public. That he had ended the arms race with the USA, shown weakness, and let America keep strategic defense initiative. So in the future, America could launch nuclear weapons at Russia without fear of repercussion. He'd lost the war to the Afghans. He had let the other countries and the satellite states break free. He destroyed that buffer zone. Now Russia had no protection at all. And so you can understand why the hardline communists might have seen Gorbachev's relatively short time in charge of the USSR as a failure so far. And the problem was that things were getting worse. This map shows the USSR, so obviously number 11 is Russia, but it also shows the smaller countries that Russia had taken over to form the USSR. Now these countries had started to see that they could have independence as well. And in 1991, Gorbachev accepted the independence of the Baltic states of Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia. He let these places become free. And if you want a reference, that's 4, 8 and 9 on the map. And this led to other countries as well that were a part of the USSR that you can see numbered here, wanting independence from Russia. They wanted to be on their own. They didn't want to be controlled. And there were fears of the USSR breaking up. For the hardline communists, the Baltic states leaving was too much to bear. It soon became clear that Russia was going to exist on its own, and the USSR would break up completely unless the hardline communists did something to stop Gorbachev. So, they took drastic action. Here are 6 members of what was known as the Gang of 8. These were people who were in Gorbachev's government who were not happy with Gorbachev, and it looked like they were going to be replaced soon as well. They wanted to undo all of Gorbachev's changes before it was too late. So when Gorbachev was at his holiday home, ironically in Yalta, where this whole course really started, he was placed under house arrest by the government members. And they said, sign documents to say that you're stepping down. Now Gorbachev refuses to sign anything. In fact, he makes a home video explaining the situation which he tried to smuggle out. And the Gang of Eight weren't expecting Gorbachev to not back down over this, and so they're now wondering what to do. And so what they do is they go on national television and they say Gorbachev is unwell, he needs to recover and rest because he's put a lot of work in during the last few years, that the Gang of Eight are in control and they will be making some changes to Russia. And they say, look, people of Russia, stay at home, and the army would patrol the streets to make sure this happens. And the aim of the Gang of Eight was to actually sort of undo all of Gorbachev's changes. Now, this man, Boris Yeltsin, was a rival to Gorbachev. Yeltsin wanted Gorbachev to go even further. Yeltsin wanted the USSR to break up and to become capitalist. He felt Gorbachev was acting too slow. He wanted communism gone completely. Now, Yeltsin realised that if the Gang of Eight succeeded, and they undid all of Gorbachev's work, that what Yeltsin wanted would never happen. And so Yeltsin led the people on the streets to protest against the Gang of Eight, and even the army really started to refuse to take part. They refused to shoot fellow Russians. And so the Gang of Eight had no real power. The coup failed, and most of the Gang of Eight either killed themselves or were arrested. Gorbachev was freed from his holiday home, but actually his power had been undermined here. Yeltsin was seen as the true hero. And people started to realise now that Gorbachev his power was undermined, he was starting to be seen as weak. Other countries in the USSR realised they could now push for independence, and they do just that. When all the remaining parts of the USSR, the remaining states, all say to Gorbachev, we want to be free, we want to be independent of Russia as well. And it's actually clear to Gorbachev, sadly, at this point, that he has no real power anymore as leader. And so December 25th, 1991, Gorbachev resigned as the leader of the USSR. He stepped down. And surprise, surprise, he was replaced by Boris Yeltsin. And Yeltsin, basically the next day, said to the USSR, do you want to remain communist? Do you want to remain a part of the USSR? He said that to all the different independent states. They all say, no, we don't want to remain a part of the USSR. We don't want to remain communist. And so we see Russia become capitalist. We see the USSR no longer exist. It's dissolved completely. It's gone. We see these states now become independent, and we see Russia go through a huge change very quickly. And so all of the communism that we've looked at since 1917 with Lenin has gone in 1991 with Boris Yeltsin. The question is, and you don't need to know this for the course, but what happens to what the government had controlled? What happens to the powerful factories, the rich economics, places like the oil factories, for example? Who controls them now if it's not the government? Who should control them? And the government had issued vouchers to people where they could sort of buy shares in these factories and these businesses. But the people didn't really understand the value, didn't really understand the scheme. But the clever bankers did, and the clever politicians did who were in the party. And so they very quickly bought up shares for next to nothing, and they now owned the oil productions and so on in Russia. And so you saw a lot of very cunning people become very rich overnight, and you still see that today with Russian oligarchs. Whereas because of the communism being replaced and the equality gone, suddenly ended up with a lot of people struggling with the downsides of capitalism. And that's the end of the course. That is the end. 1991 is the end of the Cold War course for us. So, quiz 2. It's attached to Google Classrooms. Again, please read the questions carefully. Make sure you submit. You'll get a score straight away. And any questions, please contact me, gbrown@stopsleyhighschool.co.uk. Your next lesson will be up on Wednesday, the 13th of May. And just please take care, guys. Look after yourselves. I know you've got a lot of work going on at the moment. Anything that we can do to support, please let us know. Thank you for your hard work. Take care, and we'll start your new topic next week. Bye-bye.